What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take, and very pumped up for this edition of the podcast that I so much very love to host on a weekly basis. And it's been a bit, to say the least. It has been a bit. Can't say it hasn't been a bit. It's been more than a bit. It's been a week, and I've been very busy posting content on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page. I've been very busy promoting a lot of different things, a lot of awesome, new, innovative show ideas that have come along the way that I just cannot wait to explore. And there'll be more on that, obviously, as the weeks go by. But for now, let's just dive into the subject matter. The subject matter is Donald Cowboy Cerrone coming off of a very dominant win this past Saturday night on ESPN Plus as he defeated Raging Al Iaquinta, via unanimous decision over a 5-round main event. And heading into the bout, Al Iaquinta ranked 4th, Donald Cerrone ranked 8th, and yeah, I did touch on it a little bit on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page, going live on Facebook and people interacting with me on that and diving into what my opinion is. But I really want to dive into it a little bit more because I think there's a lot of talking points in particular with this current situation. And this current situation we're talking about within the Ultimate Fighting Championship is that of the UFC 155-pound weight division, the lightweight weight class, which is always considered by myself as the Shark Tank of the division, the Shark Tank of the weight class, where you got a lot of guys in this weight class that could easily be the champion of the world. Khabib Nurmagomedov, though, stands at the tippy top of the mountain with an undefeated 27-0 record, coming off the biggest win in his career versus Conor McGregor back in October of 2018. You have Tony Ferguson, who has had his own personal life problems and has kind of been out of commission for a little bit. Then you have the shining example of a guy that came back really from a lot of adversity in his younger days to becoming the now number one contender, and that is Dustin Poirier. And I'd imagine that Khabib Nurmagomedov and Dustin Poirier will get into the octagon to fight each other at some point, whether it's August 17th at the DC Miocic card, which would be a huge smash of a card if they were able to put those two fights, DC versus Stipe, and the main event, and then the co-main event, Khabib versus Dustin Poirier. I think that's very, very likely, actually. You also have Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero doing battle on that card finally, scheduled to do battle on that card finally, as that fight was announced today. So I think August 17th for Khabib and Dustin Poirier is pretty damn likely. Will it be August or September? Only time will tell. Could it even be November if Khabib Nurmagomedov wants to fight at Madison Square Garden on that coveted card, where we could see the John Jones versus Daniel Cormier 3 fight take place if Cormier does get that win, or even if he doesn't really get that win against Stipe. I could definitely see that possibly happening regardless as DC's last fight. But that fight is in the wings, waiting in the wings. Khabib versus Dustin Poirier, and I said that that's the fight that needs to happen next as far as a title fight. But if there was ever a time for another fighter to maybe get that shot at the winner of Khabib versus Dustin Poirier, I think that shot would then belong to Donald Cerrone. And I think a lot of people will take issue with those thoughts. And the reason why is because Donald Cerrone spent 4 years at welterweight. He had just returned to the UFC lightweight division with a win in January over Alexander Hernandez, who was ranked 11th. Then you have a win over Al Iaquinta, who's ranked 4th. But that win over Al Iaquinta just fought 25 minutes with Khabib Nurmagomedov back in April of 2018, or a year ago. And Conor McGregor did not go 25 minutes with Khabib Nurmagomedov. So the fact that Donald Cerrone really dominated and bloodied Al Iaquinta the way that he did, in a way that Khabib really didn't, really shed a lot of light on the current state of Donald Cerrone's career to me. It shed a light on the fact that Dad Donald Cerrone is 3-0 and newly minted the Fight Ranch Donald Cerrone, the man that decided to move from his longtime training facility of Jackson Winklejohn, has decided to move away from them and start his own training methods. He's undefeated. This is a new, invigorated Donald Cerrone, and this guy has done so much for the sport of mixed martial arts. He's fallen, he's got back up, he's lost plenty of fights throughout his career, but he's fought more times than anyone in UFC history. More finishes, more wins. The guy is the true epitome of what a fighter should be, and then some. So I think that he does deserve a title shot with this win over Iaquinta, being that it was a dominant victory, being that Iaquinta was riding this newfound momentum. Even in a loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov, he rebounds off that loss and dominates Kevin Lee, who was forced to move up to a new weight class. Kevin Lee, also former number one contender in the UFC lightweight division, fought Tony Ferguson in a UFC interim title fight. So Donald Cerrone belongs right in the thick of it at 155 pounds. But if Donald Cerrone doesn't deserve the winner of Khabib Nurmagomedov and Dustin Poirier, then we know what fight is out there. We know what fight makes sense. We know what fight needs to happen. And it's a fight that was talked about a lot for July, a fight that was talked about a lot for June, a fight that ultimately fell apart for reasons that are so ridiculous. It goes beyond comprehension. Conor McGregor and Donald Cerrone is easily the fight to make for both parties involved. With a win over Conor McGregor, Donald Cerrone would achieve a new status of fame. Donald Cerrone would achieve everything that he wants of being the number one contender in the division. With a win over Donald Cerrone for Conor McGregor, it puts another big feather in his cap. It puts him right back into title contention. Essentially, this would be a number one contenders fight between Conor McGregor and Donald Cerrone. Whether there's a belt on the line or not, you put Conor McGregor and Donald Cerrone together in the octagon. People will fill the seats. People will buy the pay-per-view, no matter what. It is a fight that needs no introduction. It is a fight that needs no trash talk. But you bet your ass you will get some from Conor and Cowboy. This fight is if I don't see this fight, if this fight does not come to fruition, if this fight does not happen, I will put this as the number one fight of all time that should have happened that didn't. On my should have happened but didn't fights. This fight makes so much sense. It pains me the fact that there are people out there in the mixed martial arts underground forums or in the mixed martial arts realm that are saying that this fight doesn't make sense. I don't get how this fight doesn't make sense. I don't get how Conor McGregor deserves an immediate rematch with Khabib Nurmagomedov in some of the eyes of the fans. I don't understand it. This guy was dominated. This guy was decimated. This guy was essentially embarrassed. And for as much embarrassment as Khabib brought on himself, why does Conor deserve an immediate rematch with Khabib when that fight wasn't even remotely competitive? You lose to the same guy twice, it's a career death sentence. There's no recovering from that. You rebound, you get your bearings back, you fight a big name. You fight a guy that people want to see you fight. You fight a guy that will bring out the best in you. Donald Cerrone checks off all three of those boxes. And for Cerrone right now, this is the fight that not only would make him money or not only would bring him exposure, not only all that, but with a win, it gets him exactly where he wants to be, and that is a UFC lightweight title fight. And way back, Khabib Nurmagomedov and Donald Cerrone were supposed to fight one another. the fight fell through, and there were a lot of rumors circulating. They'd actually signed to fight each other 4 separate times from 2010 to 2013. There's a lot of backstory to that Habib Nurmagomedov simply did not want to fight Donald Cerrone. Well, not that many people do want to fight Donald Cerrone, but the ones that do are known as some of the most badass fighters in mixed martial arts history because they are fighting the most badass fighter in mixed martial arts history in Donald Cerrone. At least active. Dan Henderson, I think he still has that title. Randy Couture, he's up there too. But Donald Cerrone has deserved this for such a long time. What fight is a bigger fight, a title fight or a Conor fight? Tough. But you have a guy that earned his shot, literally has a 12-pound belt wrapped around his waist that says he needs to unify those titles. Dustin Poirier has to unify those titles. This is what makes sense. Habib, Poirier, Conor, Cowboy. Hell, you could even put it on the same card. Conor and Cowboy does not need to be a main event in order for that pay-per-view to sell. Maybe the fact that it would be 25 minutes would help the case of the fight, but I'd watch that fight if it were 5 minutes long. I'd watch that fight if it was 1 minute long. I'd watch that fight if it was 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. You get the point. All of those are just particulars. Put paper to pen and make the fight. It's that simple. And if fight fans don't know whether or not they want this fight, if fight fans are just down in the dumps and wondering if this fight makes sense for either fighter, ask yourselves that question once the fight is signed. Ask yourselves that question after you watch that fight. Ask yourself one thing. Was that fight exciting? I guarantee that you will say yes. That division is so murky. The division is so, just so deep of a division. I can read it off for you as far as